Hello and welcome to Lifting the Soul Ministries pilot podcast. We are your hosts. My name is Jason Cormack, and with me today is Jason Matthews. And together we are bringing together and building something that is geared for men and helping men create a new sense of life and purpose for themselves, to develop leaders. And what we're wanting to talk about today is why good men are struggling and how to reclaim strength without becoming a tyrant. So Jason, I'm going to pass it over to you and just share a little bit about why this is important.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest things that we've seen, especially recently, is the idea that the masculinity is toxic. The entire idea that masculinity in itself is toxic, which is absolutely ridiculous, because you can't have an entire behavioral system that has been around for over 300,000 years turn around and say that it's toxic. It doesn't work. How does something that has helped humanity thrive suddenly be labeled as toxic? And I think this is one of the biggest reasons why men are struggling, because they're struggling to find their identity. And masculinity itself is very expressive. It's very outgoing. It takes risks. It does things, and sometimes it bumps up against other things, and competition is ensued. Sometimes conflict, none of which is bad, but I think is more misunderstood. And that misunderstanding has led to a lot of preconceived notions that make men feel like they are the bad guy. And the truth is that there's no real bad guy. And I think that that's one of the biggest things we really need to focus on, is the understanding that there is no real bad guy, that everyone is just doing the best they can with what they have. And there's opportunities for people to learn how to do better. And that is really important. The desire to do better and the ability to understand that, while we can do better, it doesn't mean that we're bad. It just means that we're misunderstood. And by doing better, we can become better understood, because we can act in a way that others can appreciate.
You bring up a lot of great points there, Jason. Like when I think about my own personal life and the things that I went through in my marriage relationship and stuff like that, there was an overall sense of, am I this bad of a person? Is who I am that terrible? And there was a lot of things that I struggled with as being a married man and wanting to accomplish things, wanting to achieve things, and sometimes that took me to spending more time away from home, in the sense of the work that I put in and all that other kind of stuff, and yeah, there was this large sense of, like, it's sometimes hard to explain, but really it just was just like this heavy burden of not being good enough.
And that's really the biggest part, is the fact that we don't feel that we're good enough. But there's also this urge within us to prove that we are. And every human being has that, the proof for recognition. And the reason why people require that, or why they are so drawn to it, is because we are a community-based creature. We crave community. And oftentimes we feel that in order to have the community, we have to recognize, especially if we did not get that growing up. And the recognition we're looking for isn't necessarily, look at me, I'm awesome. That's more of the outcry, if you will. It's more of the symptom. What we're looking for is, we're looking for that recognition to feel like we belong, to feel like we are enough, to feel like we can be respected for exactly who we are without needing to do anything extra. And that really comes from a lot of developmental stuff when we're children. Freud was right. It always goes back to the child. And it has to do with how we were nurtured and how we were emotionally cared for in our most important years, from infancy all the way up to about 14 years old. There's a huge time of space there. If we don't get the emotional support that we need, we suffer. And if we aren't seen as people who deserve to have their own autonomy, people who can be respected for making their own decisions for their own lives, we suffer. And these are two areas that people have had a huge problem with, men and women, but especially with men. With women, it's more of entitlement, but with men, it's that struggle. And I think it has to do a lot with the fact that when you look at what people see as being valuable. We've turned value to be materialistic, which is a huge problem. And women have natural value. They're born with value. They're valuable because they are the ones that really cultivate and nurture life. They don't create life. That's not what I'm saying. That's a whole different conversation. But they're the ones responsible naturally for cultivating and for nurturing life and making life worth living, which is a huge responsibility. And
Yeah.
women are born with that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and you brought up a lot of great points. You know, as I've been on my own personal growth journey and finding that sense of value for myself, and knowing that, as you said earlier, you know, like we have this innate desire to want to do better, right? To want to achieve, to want to persevere, and just expand, right? That, like, as a man, right? And as I've been, like, now post divorce and going through my own growth journey, that's something that I've really found has really dialed me in and given me that sense of purpose that I find a lot of men are kind of lacking today.
And this goes on to this is kind of what I was alluding to as I was talking. Women have a natural sense of value, but men have to create their value. Men don't have that natural value because their responsibility is to grow, discover, build, and secure, basically. And when men are told don't do that, that kind of behavior is wrong. Well, you strip men of exactly their full identity, their desire to create purpose, their need to build something, and their ability to become valuable because of what they can do. Now, I'm not saying that being providers or what you bring to the table is all that you are. Being a leader is so much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But in order for people to pay attention to you, you have to bring something to the table. And men have to really go out and build that on their own.
Yeah, there's like a discovery process that a man has to go through to really dig into that sense of who he is as a man and really just grow from there.
Absolutely. And it's through that discovery process, through that growth, that they really begin to understand what their value is. And as they discover their own value and they begin to project that, other people see that as well, and they gather around it. Valuable leadership creates recognition. And the more that recognition happens, the more valuable they are seen as, which means that they have more fulfillment, but they have to get there.
Right. Yeah, and then the another key component is to build off of their strengths and who they are as an individual, and not try to be something else that isn't who they are, right? Like, because each and every one of us has unique characteristics and qualities, right? And so it's about discovering that within yourself as well, and building on those strengths.
Exactly. And being able to surround yourself with people who are going to also reinforce or they're going to encourage that development of value. They're going to encourage that growth to occur. And the more that gets encouraged, the more men begin to really hone in on that and then do more of that. We're very much feedback creatures, especially men. The more feedback we get, the more we're going to do the more we're going to do what that feedback dictates, especially when it feels like it's in line. And so the point is to surround yourself with people who are going to align with the proper feedback to help you grow in the right way.
Yeah, that's so important. I wouldn't be here today talking to you if I didn't surround myself with other men at some point in my life to really cultivate this, and build me up as a man. And I found that to be such a huge and valuable, important component to my life.
Absolutely. And so I feel like this leads to something I've identified as known as the quiet epidemic,
Mm-hmm.
where good men are left feeling lost, passive, and unseen in their own relationships, where they've been reduced to providers, what they can bring to the table and nothing more, that they're basically a walking ATM or their complete value is based on what they can provide, what they can secure, which really is sad, because it focuses just on the little 10% of who a man really is, and trying to magnify that as the 90%, which doesn't work. And
Hmm.
we wonder why men are left feeling unfulfilled, and why they are doing other things, or why they just completely check out of a relationship entirely.
I can totally relate to what you were just saying. I still see myself as a provider and somebody who is responsible for my kids in particular, because I'm paying child support and stuff like that. But when in that marriage relationship, like, I took that responsibility very seriously, as I believe we should as men. But I got myself lost in that trap. That was like my sole function was just to provide, and that led me to becoming a people pleaser in a lot of ways, because I was wanting to provide for all of, I'll just say, my wife's things and stuff like that. And I lost the sense of who I was in that process, because, when say I would achieve something, and then it wasn't quite what she expected, or whatever. And then I felt, well, okay, well, I did all this, I achieved this, and it wasn't enough. And that's where I kept losing myself in that process, because I was doing it for the wrong reasons.
And that's one of the hardest things for men to learn. And when they do learn it, it kind of makes them mad. I know that's what happened with me when I was caught in that same trap of, I need to provide for my family. And
Mhm.
I just need to focus on that. If I provide for my family, they're going to see me as enough. But that leads to, in my book, The Leading Man, a practical guide for men to lead with strength and vision, I talk about this exact concept, either being a people pleaser or being someone who just self sacrifices, and how both of these are really dangerous behaviors, because they allow you to give up your authority as a man, as a leader, to others who have no idea what it means to lead in a masculine way. And it's either because they aren't masculine themselves, or they're too young. And what you risk at doing that is you risk giving someone else, or making someone else take on the responsibility of taking on that leadership role, which they can manage but definitely aren't built for. Or you teach other impressionable minds, like children, that the way that you are being as a leader is what normal leadership is, and that's dangerous.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I definitely, I can relate to that as well, on the leadership part, because I did forfeit a lot of the leadership portions of the home as well. And um, there was a lot of times where, as soon as there was some kind of resistance to what I was wanting to do, I just backed off and shut down. And it did become, a downward slope from there, because then it led to more aggression and other things within the marriage, and which causes all sorts of other complications. But yeah, it largely was because I didn't do things like set up boundaries. I didn't stand up for myself. All those things that I, now looking back at, it was like, okay, well, how could I have done things better, and all that stuff. Um, it really came down to the way I was leading in the home, which wasn't very strong at all.
Right. Basically, men are being taught to disappear as leaders. And that creates a huge problem, because masculine leadership is so vital in in the growth of the family, as well as the sustainment of society. And here's a question for you. How do you think men can really begin to see themselves as better leaders?
Hmm. That's a great question, Jason. If I were to really look at the first part, I think, is to recognize that there is something within you that can make it possible. And it's just having that glimmer of a belief that, okay, it is possible. I can do this. I can be the leader in my home. And then from there, I believe it's formulating for yourself, what does that look like? And sometimes, you may have to look for others for guidance in that. look to people who you see in life that have a strong relationship, or what looks like a strong relationship, and look at what kind of things that are they doing, and don't be afraid to ask questions about that too. I think that's the other thing that men really struggle with is they feel like they have to have all the answers within themselves, when really there's a component of curiosity in life, and in the growth process. And so being willing to ask others how they do things, or how they manage their home, how do they lead in the home, and stuff like that, can cultivate ideas within yourself to get there.
Absolutely. And I think the lack of doing that is really how relationships have begun to fracture. Because when you aren't being genuine, when you aren't surrounding yourself with the right people, when you feel like you have to have all the answers, these are components of insecurity. And the more insecure you become, the less reliable you become. And the less reliable you become, the less people want to really pay attention to you. I think it's something where, you know how when you were in a relationship, and same thing goes with me, probably with most men, when you start off in the relationship, it's really exciting. Your masculinity really at its best in the beginning of that relationship, because you have something to prove. You have something to prove to the person that you are in that relationship with,
Yeah.
and it's like you're able to stand firm, you're able to take action, you're able to set plans, boundaries, whatever. It's all great. And then as you go into the relationship, it's almost like there's this dance that happens where you want to be more accommodating for your partner, and at the same time your partner wants to test the boundaries of what you're going to permit.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, and you don't want to lose the relationship, and this fear of loss, which is kind of one of the biggest fears that people have, start to kick in. And so the men start to internally compromise. They begin to negotiate against themselves about what they should be doing. And so they continually, little by little, they back off on what they feel are their proper boundaries in order to, like, yes, dear, or whatever you want, keep her happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually that leads to indecision. It eventually leads to a point where a man doesn't can't make a decision, and his partner feels like she has the right to either question his decisions or veto those decisions for something else. And
Yeah.
in some cases, I can see where that would be okay. I mean, especially if you when you're in a serious relationship and you are making things happen, and something doesn't feel like it's going to be good for the home. It's going to be good for how things are going to cultivate and develop. Yeah, there need to be concerns raised. But if a man has a vision for what he wants to achieve, and she says, "No, I don't want that," and doesn't give any kind of explanation or any kind of alternative or solution, I think that this becomes the first evidence of toxicity in a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
because um, there's nowhere to go from there. It's just, I want to be in control. And then that leads to the indecision, like I said, also resentment in the relationship. It begins the pulling away of emotional connection. And that with resentment are the two destroyers of 90% of all relationships. Like, most relationships do not survive resentment, because once resentment kicks in, you don't see your partner as your partner. You see them as your adversary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 100%. I was there. 100% I was there, right? Like, yeah, as I continued to compromise and give up more and give up more, she started losing more and more respect for me as a man. As I found out, the more I became a people pleaser, the more I tried to appease her moods or whatever else that was going on, uh, the the more that those things, tended to happen. And I, as a result, when I look at taking responsibility for what I did, and we're not standing up for myself, or not holding true to what I was envisioning and all that other kind of stuff, and then as she started kind of pushing, right, like pushing back more and more and more and more, I would give up more and more, and then I would resent more and more. and then I would pull back emotionally, and the more I pulled back emotionally, the more aggressive she got, because she recognized that I was pulling back emotionally, and she wanted me to connect in more, and and I was missing the link, right? Like, I was missing the fact that when I was giving up the things that I was, my when I was giving up my leadership and my control by being complacent, by being the people pleaser, by doing all these things, I didn't realize that I was the one that was actually causing a lot of this distress.
Hmm. Yeah. Can you speak more about that?
Well, basically, what I mean by that is by me compromising all the time, that's where I lost myself in the sense of what was going on, and it just kind of kept compounding, in the
Mhm.
sense of I would attempt to achieve something on her behalf or whatever, and then it would not turn out the way I thought it would. So hidden expectations, right? That's another thing that I think is something important that should be discussed, is we can sometimes place unrealistic expectations on things, and so when my expectations weren't being met, because I thought if I was going to achieve this, then I'm expecting this outcome, and then when that outcome didn't happen, the resentment would build. And so when I talk about taking responsibility for that, and how I played into that, a lot of it was my own mental game of these expectations, and surrendering where I shouldn't have been surrendering.
I can totally relate with that. I actually have a story of my own where I realized that I was I've I've been in a lot of relationships, and I think the main reason why I've been in so many is because I was always looking for something that I was looking for something to complete me, rather than me seeing that I had everything that I needed on my own. It's
Mhm.
always a long development process for me to really find a relationship where it was mutual respect. And I left a lot of relationships left me. And it was the kind of thing where I felt like there was a problem other than me. Like, why can't I get what I need? And I think that is a huge problem that we as men face, is humans entirely, but especially with men, since we're talking about them, is that idea of there is nothing that you are seeking out there, because you have to first generate it inside before you can really appreciate what comes to you.
Mhm.
And if you're missing something, this might get a little bit woo woo, but if you're missing something, that you're going to be attracting what you're lacking, because it is basically a lesson of trying to teach you, hey, dipshit, this is already within you. Stop looking
Yeah.
out, stop looking outside, because you have to develop this within you, or else you won't be able to have anything that really resonates. And it took me a long time to get that, until I met my current wife, that I was able to really understand that the only way that I'm going to have a successful relationship is if I work on the things that are lacking within me, and I do the work. And
Mhm.
I think it takes a strong relationship, a strong pair really of people, to hold space for that without trying to encroach on the other person's role. Like you had said, your wife was, or your ex-wife when you were married, was constantly encroaching on your position, trying to draw you out, thinking that by doing that she could mirror what you needed, but really you saw it as an attack.
Mhm.
And instead, being able to invite you to return to that position. And I think there this really is just it's just a communication issue.
Yeah.
When you look at it, when you look at the way that people are interacting, there's a huge communication issue, and I think that this causes a lot of the problems.
Yeah, communication is key. And I also liked how you tapped into, finding it within yourself. And that's something else that I've been really growing into in the last few years, is, like, yes, we are social creatures. We are meant to be connected with other people and stuff like that. But we cannot find our complete and 100% fulfillment in other people. And when we are completely dependent on somebody else to feed us everything that we think that we need, and when they don't provide that for us, that itself becomes a very dangerous position for the person, because we also put up resentment towards them about that, because they're not meeting all my needs.
Mhm.
And stuff like that. And the truth is I don't think any one person is supposed to meet any other person's all their needs, right? Like there's got to be a point where we are somewhat independent, right? And instead of building a codependency with somebody else, it's more of an interdependence is what we're really are looking for.
That is a huge concept, and you're absolutely correct. The more that we can see each other as being co-creators of a reality, which is that interdependency, not dependency, is understanding that we stand on our own, yet we work together because we have to, because that is what creates success. Nothing was built alone. Everything
Mhm.
requires other people's involvement. And your success, if you try to do things alone, your success will always only be personal. It will never be impactful. To be impactful, you need others. So let me ask you another question, Jason. In regards to being that impactful and to really being able to create that healthy interdependency, what do you think masculinity needs to demonstrate for that to happen?
Oh, that's a great question. And the with where I'm at right now, it starts with really rediscovering who you are first and building on that. And once you get to the point where you start to really fully understand yourself, and then you can really welcome in those other people into your life. And it's about building bridges and not building barriers. So so I think that's some of the really key components of it for my, like, that's what I've been discovering. And the other thing is to not make it all about yourself either, in the sense of, because we don't know it all, right? And so what true interdependence is working with each other's strengths and understanding that, you know, like your life partner, your wife is not going to have the same strengths that you have, and you're not going to have the same strengths that she has. And how can we blend those together to create and cultivate something that is truly magical?
Absolutely. And this goes really well into the idea that of what men need to provide. Because, like you said, it's about building bridges and not barriers. And this is something that both men and women can do. And the more they do this, the more likely they are to create healthy relationships, healthy communication, and healthy connections, whether it be intimate, personal, professional, or just social. These are things that cut across all types of relationship building.
Mhm.
And it really goes into understanding what the strengths are of masculinity. It has nothing to do with being controlling, being loud, or
Right.
pushing one's weight around. It has nothing to do
Yeah.
with that at all, because that does not build bridges. It does more to build walls. And I think that people are comfortable, or they are used to building walls because they really want to self-protect. But
Mhm.
self-protection isn't an answer. However,
Yeah.
when you set direction and you're clear with the direction you are setting, when you stand firm in your decisions and you do so with kindness, when you're
Mhm.
willing to protect emotionally and give space to the people that you are connecting with, and you're able to stick into that leadership even when it feels uncomfortable, just know that this is where you're supposed to be, because discomfort does create growth. I think
Mhm.
these are things that men really need to really develop more. What do you think?
I totally agree with you. Life isn't easy, right? Like, and it's those challenges, it's those trials, it's those things that test us, that really kind of help cultivate and develop us as a person. And I find that a lot of times we try to run away from all that conflict because we don't want to be uncomfortable. And so it's about learning how to be uncomfortable or comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And you know, like there's going to be conflict in any relationship, and the marriage relationship in particular is one that if there's no conflict of any kind at some point, there's something that there's something that I think should be looked at. Because I mean, I mean, is it possible to have a completely conflict-free relationship? Probably,
No,
but but not really. You know, to be honest
no.
with you, because our spouses are really there to test us in some regards, right? And if we take it in the sense of not as an attack, but as an opportunity to grow. And how can we build that bridge instead of putting up that wall in the relationship? It can really transform the direction of where the relationship is going.
I think you said something that really needs to be talked about, and this is the idea of conflict and what conflict really is. Because I think people try too much or try too hard to avoid conflict because they see conflict as being bad. Conflict leads to destruction.
Yeah.
Is something that I hear people talk about a lot, and this is complete bull. There's no way that your conflict is going to create disaster. It's not the conflict, that's how you deal with the conflict. Because conflict is inevitable. Everyone is going to experience conflict because everyone has their own idea of what right is. This is with men, with women, with your spouse, with your friends, with your parents, with your siblings, with your children, with everyone. Doesn't matter who it is, you're going to encounter conflict. It's a guarantee, period. You're going to encounter conflict. And it's not about the conflict that you encounter, but how you deal with it. How do you negotiate that conflict? And this is something that men need to be very good at doing, because men are supposed to run towards conflict. They're supposed to manage it.
Yeah.
And the more that men successfully manage conflict, the more people look at them as being credible leaders. Masculine leadership is, by definition, the managing and resolution of conflict in order to achieve a shared goal.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of great points there, Jason. And you know, when I think about, I was that person that ran away from conflict. I hated it. I shut down emotionally when conflict arose. Like I literally, I was in such an unhealthy space that when the tension started rising, I would literally just mentally shut down to the point where I would almost fall asleep at times because my mind was just wanting to protect itself. It put up that barrier, and it just was not wanting to lean into the conflict, and that created that cultivated more of that unhealthy space within the marriage relationship by me behaving in that way, or me doing those kinds of things, because it caused more of a divide, right? And so instead of me recognizing, okay, this is something that is important, it's valuable, how can I look at alternative ways to dealing with this in a more mature way than just shutting down?
Absolutely. So for those who are watching, just what I want you to do is strap in. If you like what we've been talking about so far, this is the kind of thing that you're going to expect. This is only episode 1. This is just the introduction episode that Jason and I are doing. And it's just going to get great. It's just going to get even better from here. So, Jason, what can our listeners expect from us, like to talk about? Why are we doing this?
Well, the reason why we're doing this is we recognize that we live in a very complicated world, and men are struggling, and relationships are struggling. The family dynamic is struggling. It's being fractured. It's being pulled apart. And we have a heart to reach out and connect with men on a real, raw level. So we want to bring forth real conversation, real topics, real things that will really strike a nerve, in a sense, to bring men to realize that there's more within them. There's more strength within them. There's more resilience within them. There's more true empowerment within them, and that they're not alone. I think that's the biggest thing, is they're not alone in their struggle, because there's thousands and millions of men around the world who are going through things that you're going through. And we want to connect with you on a real level, and we want to bring these topics to you and talk to you in a real way to help in some form. If any of this, at any point, even one point of it, gets you to think a little differently, to have a little bit more hope, to have a little bit more of a sense of purpose, that's why we're here.
Absolutely. I mean, this place is kind of like, this podcast is kind of like a forge, if you will, where we're inviting men to really understand how they can be better, how they can be better leaders, better providers, better protectors, basically better as men. We really want to focus on rebuilding strong, honorable men, not because they speak loudly or because they have a strong presence. This isn't about a place for blaming or for, God forbid, anyone ever whines on this show. I'm just going to boot them the hell out. But really, it's making sure that men really own their power. Also, this is not a place to demonize or bash women. This is not about the battle of the sexes. This is about making sure that men understand what their power is and how they can better cultivate that. So as we move forward, as we continue on this journey, Jason and I, and as you listen with us, really what we want to do is we want to focus on having conversations that really challenge the idea of what relationships are and how men are an important and vital role within them in regards to all things relationships. So sex, respect, conflict, leadership, family, all of it. And we want to make sure that as you listen and as we have guests come on as well, that we're going to bring on for their perspective, that you feel like we are talking to you. And so we're going to eventually we're going to have an opportunity where you can message us or contact us in some way. We're able to understand what it is that you want to hear, what you want us to talk about. We got somewhat of a format, but we're going to keep it pretty loose, I think, right, Jason?
Yeah, we're gonna do our best to cultivate a community where it's safe to ask questions. It's safe to come and share the things that you're going through, but also to understand that we're here to be real. We're not here to put fluffy clouds in the air or blow smoke up your ass, right? Like we want to really dig in and really help cultivate a culture that will really, I guess, just bring a direction and help men find their direction. Because for every person, it's going to be different. For every man, it's going to be a little bit different, because we all have the unique skills and abilities that have been implanted within us, right? And so how it's about bringing that forth within you.
At the same time, very well said, Jason. At the same time, some of these are going to be hard truths. You might want to turn off the they say, screw this, these guys are full of shit. But what I would like you to do is, before you do that, before we say something that's going to offend you, because no one can be offended anymore. Understand that, one, you have the right to be offended. That's okay. You can be offended. That's fine. No one died from being offended, I don't think. But two, take a pause and really understand what is it about this that's making me feel triggered.
Mm-hmm.
And is this something that I can really identify with, or is it something that really violates my morals? We don't want to violate your morals, but we do want you to grow. So some of these things are going to be brutal truths. They're going to be very direct. I am a very direct person. when I talk to people, I can sometimes be like sandpaper because the things that I say, I know that I have to be direct. And we may not be for everyone, but our hope is that we are for the men that want to grow and want to be the men that your families need.
That sandpaper analogy is great. Like when we think about sharpening the sword or sharpening steel on steel, right? Like that, the idea is that there's roughness there, there's other spaces that speak about being the salt, right? Like salt in a wound can be painful, but what that salt in the wound can also bring healing, right? And so
Yep.
that's why we want to be real. That's why we don't want to be beating around the bush or whatever. We want to be as direct as possible with you.
Absolutely. So if that's the kind of thing that you're looking for, stick around because we're going to be doing a lot more of that. If you're ready to stop surviving and really start leading as a man, then this might be the podcast for you to really pay attention to. And just as we deliver episodes, consume them as you will. Leave comments, leave suggestions, whatever. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Many people have tried and they have all failed. So give me your worst. I welcome it all. It's all feedback. Because when you're creating something, you build a plan as you fly it, which means you can't fail. All you can do is recognize how you can do better. And I think Jason, you and I are both in a place where we're looking to do better, not be perfect.
100%, 100%. You know, this is a growth journey as much for us as it is for those that we're speaking to, and we want to welcome you to be a part of that experience. And that's why we're saying that, you know, you can reach out to us, and you'll find in the description and all that sort of stuff ways that you can contact us. You can go to our website at liftingthesoulministries.com, or you can email us directly at info@liftingtheministries.com.
Liftingthesoulministries.com. Yeah. It's a great, this would be a great platform. You may not trust us yet because this is our first episode. That's fine. Just keep listening. And then as we build trust with you, as we build that connection with you, feel free to reach out. If there are things that we're saying that you want to hear more of, or if there are things that we're not covering you want us to cover, let us know. More than happy to accommodate that and build it into our show. Jason, any final notes before we sign off?
I just want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you for just joining the journey with us, and we look forward to connecting with you more.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm Jason Matthews. This is Jason Cormack saying thank you so much for being here, and we look to engage with you again.
Until next time. Bye for now.